more Israeli armies shelling more death and destruction in northern Gaza. At least 24 Palestinians are killed. Many of those were seeking shelter. Hello, I'm Darren Jordan. This is Al Jazeera, live from Doha. Also coming up, besieged and bombed with nowhere safe to go. The UN says Israel's evacuation orders have displaced 90% of Gaza's population since the war began. Hungry and desperate, thousands of people in Nigeria are displaced by devastating floods and are scrambling for food and shelter. Plus,
I'm Teresa Bo in Buenos Aires, where human rights organizations who have been struggling to find those who went missing during the dictatorship in the 1970s and 80s say they're facing new challenges with the government of Javier Milei.
we begin in northern Gaza, where there's been heavy shelling by the Israeli army. Israeli forces targeted Beit Lahia city, that's close to the border, and Jabalia, which was once Gaza's largest refugee camp. At least 24 people have been killed across the strip since Friday. Well, in Gaza City, Palestinians are fleeing the Zaytun neighborhood. There's been heavy Israeli army operations in the area. Several buildings have been leveled in airstrikes. Israeli forces are reportedly trying to expand a military corridor meant to separate north and south Gaza. Well, people are fleeing the southern city of Khan Yunis due to Israel's expanding ground offensive. Israel had issued an evacuation order on Wednesday. Women and children were seen escaping on foot. Many are moving west towards Al-Mawasi, which Israel has attacked repeatedly, despite declaring it a so-called safe zone. Well, in central Gaza's largest city, Deir al-Balah, Israeli forces have stepped up their attacks. Al Jazeera's Tariq Abazoum reports.
The Israeli army is still ramping up its military operations, including land and aerial bombardment in the central area, farther in the north and in the even southern part of the strip. But the eyes of the Israeli occupation forces now are on Deir al-Balah city here, which housing more than 1 million Palestinians after the new displacement orders for 19 blocks in the city of Khan Yunis. Now, Palestinian families are trapped in the western side of Deir al-Balah, while the military now is operating in the eastern areas. Now, we have been witnessing a very horrific bombardment in the hours of night, and even within the early hours of this morning. We continue to hear loud explosions every now and then. The fighting is really raging between Hamas fighters and the Israeli occupation forces in the eastern areas. We can also hear the sound of the Israeli drones every day, every hour here. What we continue to hear as well is that the army is operating in the city of Khan Yunis, where 19 blocks have been told by the Israeli occupation forces to flee, and now its residents are also heading to the western side of Khan Yunis, close to Al-Mawasi, which yesterday has been under the Israeli fire, especially by the Israeli military quadcopter drones. People here are wondering about this very growing humanitarian pressure that Israel is exerting on civilians. Now, everyone is exhausted, everyone is looking for Doha talks, but they believe that Israel is so determined to keep up the fighting. That's why Palestinians are no longer believe that there might be a ceasefire, because they are right now trapped in a very small batch of land, and they are subjected in that batch of land to all sorts of aerial and land bombardments. They have a very growing sense of frustration day by day due to the continuation of the fighting on the ground with no sort of respite so far. Tariq Abazoum, Al Jazeera, Deir al-Balah, Palestine.
Well, as I just heard from Tariq there, Palestinians are fleeing once again because of these new Israeli military operations. Aid agencies say the so-called humanitarian zones in Gaza have shrunk to just 11% of the strip and are too full to accommodate new arrivals. 30,000 people are packed into every square kilometre of these so-called safe zones, and despite their designation, they face constant attacks. The UN says 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced since the start of the war, and the shrinking space for them to seek refuge is raising fears over the outbreak of disease. Well, Dr. Thaya Ahmed is working at Nasser Hospital in January before its collapse. He says the need for medical supplies has never been more urgent.
The concern is, how are we going to reach the vulnerable people if they keep being displaced by evacuation orders? In August alone, There were 12 evacuation orders. And these orders are also affecting UN agencies, NGOs, healthcare workers, people who are on the ground. So the fact that we have a confirmed case with the limited capabilities and the collapsing healthcare system, the fact that we have one case of polio means that there are several others. This is a canary in the coal mine. We know that there are others out there. The next question is, well, how do we stop this? And it's with clean water. You know, we use chlorine tablets to help clean and disinfect the water. There have been no chlorine tablets that have entered Gaza since January. All of the water that people are using is contaminated. It's not safe. So the second part of it is, how can we get them the vaccine? If we can't even bring in medical supplies because of the restrictions, if the Rafah border is effectively shut down and we're totally dependent on the Israeli military allowing humanitarian aid in, we know that we are in jeopardy of losing many people, kids who will be paralyzed for the rest of their lives, elderly who could have been saved. All of these people are at risk. And the WHO, the health ministry, all different NGOs, they're saying we need days of tranquility so that we can at least deliver these vaccines and administer them. And they want to plan to roll this out on August 31st. But by the looks of it, we have no chance of having a successful rollout vaccination campaign.
Well, tens of thousands of Palestinians are cramped together in makeshift tents under intense summer heat. Al Jazeera's digital platform, AJ Plus, spoke to families who are surviving without any basic supplies. Here's Bassam Auda's report.
This is Bassam from Gaza. I'm still alive, and I know that we are living in the hottest era in this world. I mean it. Our world is melting due to the global warming. And I know that this is a common thing. I mean, everyone in this world is suffering from the high temperature during this summer. But imagine living this extremely hot weather as a Gazan in the genocide. Imagine spending your summer in a plastic tent 24 hours, 7 days a week for months now, or even not having a tent because you are moving all the time due to the continuous displacement. Imagine being a Gazan without an electricity for 10 months. That means no ACs, no fans, even cold water.
لما بنجيبها بس بستنى ايش بيقولوا لنا الصبح بتكون حاطين فيها دواء عشان للزراعه، فبنستنى بعد الساعه 2 بقول لك بتروح الدواء. يعني بعبيها في جزاز بحطها بين البطاطين بتضلها بارده شوي. هي عندك تشوفيها هي بطاطيننا، وهي المي تاعتنا الثلاجه. المي السخنه بحط الجردل هي مغطى من الغبر عشان البنات يتحمموا فيها عشان يسخن. على الشمس يما شو بدي اعمل؟ كله وسخ وقلت نظافه، فيش يما ولا في شامبوهات ولا في صابونه، ما فيش مواد تنظيف بالمره. علبه الشامبو 180 شيكل ولا احنا قادرين نجيبها.
انا عمري 75 سنه، يعني مش مقدره على الخيم اقعد فيها. الشوبه نار اكلتنا جو، احنا مش قادرين نقعد جوا في قلب الخيم. يعني انت شايفه انا قاعده هاي بطانيه عاملاها معرش، باجي من الصبح بقعد هنا والعصر بتكسر علي ظلي بقعد في الشقه الثانيه.
يا وعسفيه
من وين وعسفيه؟ ما انا بقول لك انا طلعت من بيتي ما جبتش غير الهدم اللي علي، ما فيش ولا صيفي ولا شتوي، طلعنا زي بالهدم اللي علينا. شوفي كيف يعني طرحت هيها مخزقه من كل جميع النواحي، ما فيش حاجه نحط عروسنا.
من ايش عبد الله بيعاني منطقه الجندي؟
من حم الخيمه، من شوب الخيمه، من الرمل اللي بيقعدوا عليه الاطفال، كله ملوث. حياتنا يعني ما فيش، حتى الهواء ملوث.
لما الاطباء نصحوا عبد الله نصحوه بايش العلاقه؟ براد، مي بارده؟
يبعد عن الشوب وما يمسكش الرمل وخليه بمنطقه بارده دائما. فما فيش هوايات والدنيا حر وانت عارفه.
But looks like the next summers will be even hotter because the genocide is still ongoing, and Israel bombed Gaza so far, like in 10 months, by more than 70,000 tons of explosives. The environmental results are catastrophic. So I'm so sorry, but looks like the heat will be even harder.
Well, the White House says US President Joe Biden has spoken to the Emir of Qatar and Egypt's president about the ongoing ceasefire talks in Cairo. Al Jazeera's Rosalind Jordan has the details from Washington, D.C.
The U.S. President Joe Biden has spoken in recent weeks about the need to end the war in Gaza as quickly as possible, and he has done that by trying to push forward a bridging proposal which he wants Israel and Hamas to agree to as quickly as possible. On Friday, the president spoke with the leaders of Qatar and Egypt about their efforts to support these talks that are now underway in Cairo in order to try to bring to a close a deal that would see the release of the remaining Israeli captives from Hamas, that would bring a ceasefire to Gaza in toto, as well as try to bring in humanitarian aid, all with an eye towards reducing regional tensions. The White House has put out a statement underscoring urgency in both conversations that President Joe Biden had with the Emir of Qatar and with the president of Egypt, and noting that they would be in close consultation in the coming days, given that talks after being held on Thursday and on Friday in Cairo should resume on Sunday. The U.S. is very concerned that another prolongment of this war in Gaza could possibly make for a wider regional war in the Middle East. That is something the U.S. does not want to see. Earlier on Friday, a spokesperson for the White House told reporters in a telephone briefing that part of the situation is getting Hamas to the table and for everyone to try to make an agreement as quickly as possible. For their part, the Egyptians say flexibility on both Hamas and Israel's part should be atop of the game. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.
The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor has called on judges to urgently rule on his arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister. Karim Khan filed a request for arrest warrants back in May, and they also target 3 Hamas leaders, 2 of whom have now been killed. Khan says the ICC has jurisdiction to investigate war crimes in this situation, and that any delay in proceedings would affect the rights of victims. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has suspended his long-shot presidential campaign and endorsed Donald Trump. The former independent candidate made the announcement at a news conference in Arizona on Friday. Kennedy says internal polling showed staying in the race would hurt the Trump campaign, so he's removing his name from the ballot in about 10 battleground states. Well, Donald Trump then brought RFK Jr. to his campaign rally in Arizona. If re-elected, Trump vowed to open a new presidential commission on assassination attempts. It would be tasked with releasing all information relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who was RFK Jr.'s late uncle. French President Emmanuel Macron has met party leaders to try and agree on who should be prime minister. Macron's gamble to call snap elections back in June backfired when his centrist coalition lost its majority. Bernard Smith reports from Paris.
If France's alliance of left to far-left parties, the New Popular Front, or NPF, has its way, then this woman will be France's next prime minister.
We came here to remind the president of the importance of respecting the election results and to get the country out of the paralysis in which it is submerged.
The NPF says that as it won the largest share of the vote in June's elections, the president should appoint its choice as prime minister. Emmanuel Macron doesn't seem so keen. He'd prefer a grand alliance of the left and centre. His outgoing Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, has been waiting 6 weeks to hand over the reins, unprecedented in modern France. Opposition figures have sharply criticised Macron for taking so much time.
Macron will finish consultations on Monday, and we need an answer on Tuesday, because in the end the risk is that we all get stuck, you, us, this country, in a sort of institutional soap opera.
Macron created this paralysis by calling snap elections years earlier than necessary. His party lost its majority, and only a so-called Republican front stopped the far-right winning power, with many votes cast against them rather than in favour of the alternatives. Emmanuel Macron's choice for Prime Minister must be able to survive a vote of confidence in the Assembly. From these talks is supposed to emerge the name of someone both the President and the Parliament can get behind. A tough ask when most members of the Assembly have no time for Macron. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera, Paris.
The Philippines is accusing China of harassing and endangering one of its aircraft over the South China Sea. Manila says flares were fired at a Philippine patrol flight by a Chinese fighter jet, which got dangerously close. China and the Philippines have had repeated confrontations in these contested waters. Beijing claims almost the entire South China Sea, despite an international court ruling saying it's without merit. Officials in the Kursk region of Russia have started to build air raid shelters for residents there. Fighting is continuing after Ukrainian forces launched a surprise incursion earlier this month. Joseph Jabari went to see the new shelters.
This is Lenin Street in the heart of Kursk city, where officials have started to put up these concrete shelters to protect the nearly 450,000 civilians here. Now, there's going to be at least 60 of them across the city near the bus shelters for people to use quickly in case of a missile threat. Inside looks like this, pretty straightforward and simple structure. It's designed to hold at least 10 people at a single time. Now, these concrete shelters are not only going to be built in Kursk city, but they're also going to be built in the towns of Zeleznogorsk and Kurchatov, about 40 kilometers from here. That's where the Kursk nuclear power plant is located. And given the ongoing fighting taking place between Russian and Ukrainian forces along the border, there are concerns about the safety of the nuclear plant. President Vladimir Putin has already accused Ukraine of attacking the facility on Wednesday evening, and the UN Nuclear Watchdog Director General is due to travel to the plant to investigate in the coming days. While all this is going on, the city is preparing for the worst. It's not just concrete shelters that are going up, but there are a number of government buildings like this one that are doing this, blocking their windows with sandbags. As air raid sirens disrupt the tranquility of this quiet city, people are reminded that the front lines are about 90 kilometers from here. And this picturesque city, with a history of fighting the single largest tank battle in the history of warfare in World War II, is yet again preparing for what is to come. Dorsa Jabari, Al Jazeera, Kursk City, Russia.
Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces have agreed to provide safe humanitarian access through 2 routes. It follows US-led peace talks in Geneva, which began in mid-August.
We got agreements, along with many people around the world and in the region, to open Adre, got commitments from the RSF and SAF and others to activate around that. And for the first time in 4 months, trucks moved across the border into areas where over 500,000 women and children face starvation.
Time for a short break here in Al Jazeera. When we come back, at least 3 people are dead and 4 others wounded after a stabbing in Germany. A manhunt for the suspect is now underway. And Brazil's battle against drug cartels boils over. Anti-police protesters fill the streets of Rio's largest slum. More on that. Stay with us.
Hello, high pressure dominates the weather across that eastern side of North America, so it's going to be very warm and sunny. There we go with our high there. Largely clear skies, a little more in the way of showers down towards the southeastern corner. Follow that arc back around towards the Four Corner States, looking at more showers coming through here as well. And some wetter weather. It's cool enough. It's not particularly great across the west coast. See that wetter weather pushing up into western parts of Canada, easing further eastwards as we go through Sunday. 1 or 2 showers around the lakes, nothing too much to speak of. And with our high over towards that eastern side of the country, well, we could get 32 Celsius in DC by that stage. Still those showers, though, down towards southernmost parts across Florida. Those showers extend their way through the Bahamas. Cuba catching a shower or 2. Jamaica could see some showers. 1 or 2 showers over towards the Windward Islands. So I think anywhere from around Barbados down to Trinidad, you could catch a shower or 2 as we go on through the next couple of days. I suspect for the leeward it's looking largely dry and fine. Scattering of showers across Central America. Some big ones, certainly a possibility up towards southern parts of Mexico. Some 1 or 2 heavy downpours there coming into northern parts of the Yucatan.
A sense of belonging.
If I'm the success, Eden is behind my success.
And the everyday heroes keeping communities together.
I believe I'm the best coach and I'm confident of myself.
Al Jazeera visits the Kenyan town of Iten.
that produces some of the world's fastest runners, and where a terrible crime has led to a reckoning with gender-based violence. A sense of community on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. You're watching Al Jazeera. A quick reminder of our top stories here this hour. Israeli forces kill at least 24 Palestinians across Gaza and force more people to flee their homes and shelters. Beit Lahia city, close to the border, and Jabalia, which was once Gaza's largest refugee camp, have both come under attack. Palestinians across Gaza are fleeing new military operations by Israel. The UN says Israel has issued 13 new evacuation orders in Gaza just this month. 90% of the population has been displaced at least once since the start of the war. And Donald Trump is back on the campaign trail with the endorsement of former candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He joined Trump on his latest stop in Arizona, where the Republican candidate vowed to set up a presidential commission on assassination. Now, German police say a man suspected of killing 3 people in a stabbing attack in the city of Solingen is still on the run. At least 5 others were injured in what authorities have called a planned attack on Friday. Witnesses saw the man attacking pedestrians with a knife during a festival marking the city's 650th anniversary. The mayor has issued a statement saying the city is in shock and asked for prayers for the victims.
We assume a single offender. He's on the run. He killed 3 people at the city festival and seriously injured others. So we can't say that he's not dangerous. But is he still on the run and looking for more victims? That would be speculation. But of course, I can't say with 100% certainty that there is no danger from this person. That's why we still advise caution.
Now, it's been more than 40 years since Argentina's military dictatorship collapsed. An estimated 30,000 citizens were killed in the 1970s and 80s. Many of those victims simply disappeared, and their families are still searching for answers. But the current right-wing government shutting down an investigation unit in charge of finding them, claiming it violates the Constitution. Teresa Bow has the story.
Guillermo Pérez Roisenblit was in his 20s when he found out the true identity of his biological parents. It was 24 years ago. In 1978, his mother Patricia was 8 months pregnant with him when she was detained by members of the military during the dictatorship. Guillermo was born in a clandestine detention center.
My parents continue to be missing, and I only found out who I was when I agreed to a DNA test. I found out that I was not an only child, that my real father was not in the military, that I had a real sister, that my national ID was fake.
Argentina had one of the bloodiest military dictatorships in Latin America in the 1970s and 80s. Thousands of left-wing guerrillas, but also political opponents, were killed. Many were disappeared by the military.
During the dictatorship, many women were brought to this complex, which was also a clandestine detention center. Many gave birth and their children given away to military couples to raise. It's estimated that around 500 children were separated from their mothers. Their relatives are still trying to find where they are.
But under the government of Javier Milei, finding those missing children will become much more difficult. The Ministry of Justice announced it has shut down a special investigative unit in charge of finding them, saying it violates the constitutional order. Karina Vilela represents the grandmothers who are trying to find their missing grandchildren.
This is a search that has been ongoing for decades, and time is of the essence because the grandmothers are very old. We don't have many of them left, and closing the unit makes it very difficult. We are very concerned.
For many, the government's decision is ideological, as Javier Milei and his political party have consistently denied Argentina's long-standing consensus over the dictatorship's crimes.
We are not only seeing denialism of what happened, but revindication, which is a step further, being proud of what they did.
Human rights groups say there are over 300 children that need to be located. So far, they have managed to find at least 130. But without political support, finding them becomes an even greater challenge. Teresa Bo, Al Jazeera, Buenos Aires.
Well, Sebastian Lacunza is the former editor of the Buenos Aires Herald, and he says the idea of the search units being unconstitutional is unheard of.
Javier Milei wasn't a member of the pro-dictatorship group, but he has allies who were part of this pro-dictatorship group, pro-perpetrators with ties to many members of the military who are now in jail. This debate broke a consensus in Argentine society about the dictatorship and the need to prosecute the perpetrators. There were more than 1,000 military accused and sentenced in the last 4 decades since the dictatorship came to an end. For Milei, it's a way to reignite the debate. To be honest, this is the first time I hear this week that this kind of units can be considered unconstitutional. It was held by conservative governments in Argentina, progressive governments, Peronist, center-left governments, and conservative governments. There are state institutions in the government, in the Attorney General office, in many places in Argentina, trying to find the children, to create programs to educate or to train the military in democratic values. So to be honest, this is very original, this way of thinking.
There have been protests in one of Rio's largest favelas after a police operation forced 49 schools to shut down. 9,000 children are affected. Authorities are also destroying more than 40 buildings that they say are funded by cartels. But as Monica Yanakiev reports, some of the poorest people are caught in the middle and are losing their homes.
In one of Rio de Janeiro's largest favelas, people gathered to watch their homes being torn down, one by one, and to raise their voices in protest. They say they're the innocent victims of an ongoing war between Rio's authorities and drug cartels, which control large parts of the city. Protesters say the police are treating them all as criminals.
These buildings were inhabited by regular workers who saved to buy a home or set up a shop. Now they have nothing left. They've not only destroyed brick walls, but also our dreams.
A police officer told us they are targeting properties owned by drug cartels, which have been investing in real estate to launder money. Their orders, he said, were to demolish 300 apartments, allegedly built by criminals in the Maré slum. But who will deal with the collateral damage? Nobody has the answer.
People here have been telling us that they are protesting because every time there is a police operation, everything shuts down, like these stores that you can see here. And also, not only that, not only people are unable to go to work, but also schools have closed down, like this one. 49 schools were forced to close down during this police operation, and that means that 9,000 students from the favela Maré have been forced to stay at home without any classes during the past 5 days.
Among the students, 8-year-old Moisés, who has special needs.
My son is autistic. He needs a teacher and special needs professional in school to help him interact and get an education. Thousands of children are being affected, and it's not the first time schools are closed.
Residents here say that in Rio's favelas, planning for a better future for their children is nothing but a dream. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, Rio de Janeiro.
Conditions are becoming desperate for thousands of people displaced by floods in Nigeria. While emergency shelters have been provided for many, food is a huge challenge. The situation was made worse by rising food prices. Ahmed Idris reports from Jigawa State.
In Bulangu, a man searches through the ruins of his destroyed mud house, just as his neighbor rebuilds with concrete blocks. A short distance away, Ramyuna Tanimu prepares the family's first and only meal of the day.
We eat only when we get something. We currently depend on people's goodwill.
Hundreds of thousands of Nigerians have been displaced by this year's floods. The numbers continue to rise as the rainy season peaks. 44,000 of them in Jigawa State alone, where thousands of hectares of farms and homes have been destroyed.
Most of the displaced are sheltering in public buildings like this school in Bulangu. The reconstruction of their homes could take several months. But with classrooms set to reopen in September, the government will have to decide whether to keep the refugees here or move them elsewhere.
But the immediate concern for most here is a shortage or lack of food. With most farms underwater, supplies are drying up. Where they are available, the prices have gone beyond the reach of many.
Before the floods, a measure of millet and corn cost around $1.33. The price has now risen by 25%. Most people cannot afford that.
But the government says emergency measures are in place to help farmers affected by the disaster.
What we are trying to do, we have what we call a residual moisture program. So when the rains moves away, then we will try as much as possible to provide the farmers with the early maturing crops that they can plant so that they can be able to get something.
Agriculture analysts say the crop losses will add to Nigeria's current food inflation, which has reached 33%. For now, the biggest concern victims of the disaster say is shelter and food, something they say has not reached them in quantities enough to sustain them. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Bulangu.
Now, a volcano is erupting north of the Icelandic town of Grindavik for the 6th time in 8 months. The town's home to nearly 4,000 people. It's one of Iceland's most important fishing ports. Officials say the eruption is not a threat to the town for now, though many were forced to evacuate back in December because of a previous eruption. Well, that's it from me, Darren Jordan, for now. More information, of course, on our website, aljazeera.com. The news continues here in Al Jazeera after A Sense of Community. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
An astonishing film, documenting 2 decades in one of the most embattled corners of the globe. A child of Afghanistan, 20 years of war, follows Nia from boyhood to manhood. A life that has known no peace, shaped